My name is Charlie Pelgan, and today I'll be discussing with you how policing has changed throughout history. From the Anglo-Saxon period to the police as we know today, stay with me for a journey through policing. It is difficult to contemplate life in today's day and age without the police, yet they are a relatively recent phenomenon. The date for the beginning of the police force in Britain is often given as 1829, when the Metropolitan Police first took to the streets of London, and according to Philip Rawlins, has transfixed historians of the police. However, this is often disputed by the Northern Irish and the Scots, pointing to their earlier institutions. For some, the new police emerged as a means of restoring the social cohesion that was claimed to have been lost through urbanisation and industrialisation. Depicted as a 19th century invention that underpinned modern civilization and democracy. Critchley wrote that the purpose of the police was to bring security without which civilization is impossible. Some key terms for this vlog are the Statute of Winchester, which was a statute enacted by King Edward I that reformed the system of watch and ward, the watchmen, and reviewed the jurisdiction of the local courts. Also, the hue and cry. This term came into effect after King Edward I signed the Statute of Winchester into law, stating that if citizens witnessed a crime, they not only needed to report it, but take up a cry to alert the police. This vlog will give a brief history of the police before 1829, then it would move through history to come to what we now know as the police today. This vlog will also contemplate the question how technology has brought about changes to the police. There has been much discussion of what went on before 1829. Tim Newburn, in his book Handbook of Policing, suggests that in England during the period before the conquest of 1066, evidence from historians suggests that while the state intervened in criminal activity, it did so in a way which drew on the customary practices of the blood feud and communal intervention. The codes of law drawn up by Anglo-Saxon kings, beginning with Ethelbert, were expressions of royal authority. Although at first they seem to have been concerned mainly with the codification of customary practice, they also began to re-articulate the rights of the victim and the role of the community, the neighbourhood, village, parish or town, into duties that were owed to the crown. Over the next 2 centuries, the victim's right to kill a wrongdoer was restricted, and instead an expectation was established that offenders would be brought before the courts. Another key aspect of the Anglo-Saxon codes of law was the obligations they placed on the community. Despite being duties which had been given with legal force by the state, they came about due to conflict and collaboration in any community. For example, the laws of Athelstan directed that a thief who fled shall be pursued to his death by all men who were willing to carry out the king's wishes. Riggs, 1963. The hue and cry, as this would later be known as, appears to have been a norm during those times. That is what neighbours would do. This period saw communities pulling together to help catch a criminal, but there was no focus on preventing crime. The watchmen were only there to catch a criminal if a crime was committed. However, this was the first emergence of policing, and from this, policing has developed astronomically. The early history of policing involved individual citizens maintaining law and order themselves. Back then, those citizens who served as constables, like we know today, did so on a voluntary basis and were not typically paid for their services. Shire reeves, or sheriffs, were employed full-time to oversee law enforcement activities within their shires in England. According to Critchley, the system was too corrupt and too inefficient to be able to cope and effectively keep law and order during the 18th century. And according to him, the century brought criminality which defies description. Firstly, and as far as England is concerned, the Metropolitan Police did not replace men like Dogberry and Burgess, or the comic characters from Shakespeare's Much Ado About Nothing, which were responsible for a group of bumbling watchmen. Nor did they replace old constables who could barely lift their lanterns. Police institutions around the country were already becoming increasingly professional before 1829, and especially during the 18th century. The first professional policemen in England, known as peelers or bobbies, were set up in London in 1829 by Sir Robert Peel, the then Home Secretary, after the Metropolitan Police Act of 1829. According to Newburn, it was the start of a campaign to improve public law reform. However, this was slow as there was distrust of the police at all levels. By September of 1829, the first Metropolitan Police patrolling the streets of London. There were 17 divisions, which had 4 inspectors and 144 constables each. The force headquarters was Scotland Yard, and they answered to the Home Secretary. Despite rising crime levels, most countries retained their parish constable. Many people were concerned about the idea of a uniformed force and the fear that the police would be used to arrest opponents of the government, stop protests and destroy free speech. A well-known inquiry into the death of Stephen Lawrence has also changed policing. Stephen Lawrence, who was stabbed to death by a group of white youths as he waited for a bus in Eton, southeast London. The inquiry chaired by Sir William Macpherson famously found that the police were institutionally racist. This brought about change in the way police ethnic minority communities by the recruitment of police officers from ethnic minority communities. According to Chan, 1997, racism is less overt and changes in police context have changed. It has also changed as police came to realise that the way they communicate with the public, as they found they needed to work together with communities by bringing young people into the social life of their communities. Some argue that nothing has changed since the Lawrence inquiry, particularly in regard to police's abuse of their power. However, stop and search has changed since its inquiry, as there has been amendments to the meaning of reasonable grounds for suspicion and emphasise that the misuse of stop and search powers will lead to a formal performance or disciplinary proceedings. So now that I've given you a history of the police, how has policing changed, you ask? Well, Anglo-Saxon times, it was the duty of the community to catch a criminal and deliver justice as they see fit. However, through time this has changed, as criminals having to be brought before the courts. Then the first police officers were told that the principal role was the prevention of crime. Each man was given a beat, each man was given a place and time in which to patrol. The purpose being to patrol the streets, deter criminals, investigate crimes and arrest suspects. Now, however, their role and purpose is also increasingly focused on crime prevention. In today's society, the role of the police is to maintain public order and safety, enforcing the law and preventing, detecting and investigating criminal activities. There has also been a recent attempt by the police to be seen out in their cars and on the beat. This is often not the best way of detecting crime and catching criminals, but it is reassuring to the public. So this shows that one of their main purposes has remained the same, which is patrolling the streets. As ever, changes in social behaviour and increasing awareness of certain issues all led to new departments within the force. Specialist units were created to tackle issues including the use of production of recreational drugs, the use of internet to commit crime, the growth of antisocial behaviour and pornography, to name a few. What is clear though is policing changes in response to social changes. Just like the police changed in accordance with the Lawrence inquiry, the police responded to changes in society as society became aware of the misuse of stop and search, and accordingly the police now work more closely with these communities and have recruited a more diverse force. Gone are the days where all police officers were out on the streets, as crime is on the high and criminals are finding new ways to commit crimes. The police are having to find new ways to fight this crime. This can be blamed on the rise of technology, as it has provided criminals with a whole new class of crime and has also made it extremely difficult for them to get caught. However, at the same time, new technologies have developed to help police fight against this new class of crime. That's it, and thank you very much for listening to my blog.